I'm Anil Kumar. Welcome to our website globalmathinstitute.com. In this series for grade 3 students, here is lesson number 3. We are going to talk about patterns. So in this video, we'll introduce the concept of patterns. We'll talk about number patterns, increasing patterns, decreasing patterns, repeating patterns, and then patterns in some shapes. We'll define the attributes for the patterns. So at this stage, we'll actually have an assignment and some practice test questions. And then in part 2, we'll continue further with patterns. So at this stage, we'll add here assignment. And before that, we'll have some practice examples. So let me call this as our part 1. So let's begin by defining what the patterns are. Pattern. Pattern is a series or sequence that repeats. So in simple words, that is what a pattern is. It is a series or a sequence that repeats. It follows a rule called the pattern rule. So for repeating, it has a rule, and that rule is called the pattern rule. Every item in the pattern is identified by its position. So for example, we have given here a couple of patterns. The very first pattern here is 2, 5, 7, 2, 5, 7, 2, 5, and so on. So as you can see, the term 2, 5, 7 repeat. So it has a rule to follow that these three digits, 2, 5, 7, in order will repeat. Every item in the pattern is identified by its position. So we say that the position of 2 is first, right? So that is position number 1. For 5, the position is second. For 7, it is third. So likewise, they are identified by their position. Okay? This position is called the term number. So we have defined a couple of terms here. One, pattern itself, which is series or sequence that repeats. And the way it repeats is defined by the pattern rule. In the pattern, every number or any item in the pattern is identified by its term number. So that is the another technical term, term number. Now patterns can be used for problem solving. So that is a huge application. The patterns can be used for problem solving. Correct. Now let's look into these definitions and some patterns. So in the first pattern, which you can see here, what we have is numbers 257, 257, and so on. So how does it extend? Well, what we notice is that these three terms, 2, 5, and 7, repeat. 2, 5, and 7 repeat. So after 2, 5, I should get 7, and then again I should get 2, 5, 7, and so on. So that is how they are repeating. Well, this is a special pattern where one group is repeating. So the group here is 2, 5, and 7. We also will call this as core group. So in such a pattern where exactly the same numbers are repeating, we call this as a core group. Correct. Now let's look into the second pattern. That is a kind of different pattern. What is happening here? Well, we started with 1 and now we have 1, 1, and then we have 1, 1, 1. Again, there is a pattern. What is happening here? We just keep on adding one more 1 on the side. Do you see that? So likewise, we could actually repeat this pattern. Also, it has a rule definitely, and then we could have, instead of 4 ones, we have now 5 ones, right? And then we could have 6 ones, and so on. So it repeats, but there is a pattern in which it repeats. It is not exactly repeating the same terms, right? However, there is a pattern following a rule which repeats. Now we have the third pattern, which is capital A, lowercase a, uppercase b, lowercase b, c, right? So here also we have a pattern. Alphabets in order, but first we are writing the uppercase and then the lowercase. So there is a pattern which you can identify, and then you can repeat this pattern. So in a way, we have repeated the pattern, but not exactly the same alphabets, right? There is a pattern in alphabets. So that is another type of a rule. Then we have some figures. So now this time we are talking about two orange squares followed by a circle, two orange squares followed by a circle. Well, in this particular case, we definitely repeat the whole group. So this is kind of same as the first. However, we have pictures here to repeat. So that group repeats, and therefore we know that the next pattern to follow should be a square. So let me just draw a square like this, followed by a yellow circle. So let me shade in this particular case as we could, right? So kind of it's filled in orange, right? With a circle, which is, let me shade like this and then draw a line. So we have a circle. So likewise, we have a pattern which is being followed, correct? Now, as an exercise, what you can do here is describe the above patterns. Now, when you describe, you could describe in many different ways. So you try to describe these patterns in your own way, right? So that will be question number 1 to try. So let's continue with this and see some number patterns. Now, in the number patterns, we could have three different kinds of patterns. We could have increasing patterns, decreasing patterns, and repeating patterns. Let's have a look at these patterns. Increasing patterns. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. As you can see, the numbers are increasing. Correct. And what kind of pattern rule do they follow? Well, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 is kind of a skip counting, right? So you could say it is skip, right? Okay. Or you could say add 2 each time. So as you go, you are adding 2 each time. So you could say add 2 each time, right? So likewise, you could describe this particular pattern in many different ways. You can also extend this. So the next number could be 11 and then 13 and so on. Correct. So we know exactly how the pattern should be followed, and we can now write down the other terms coming in this pattern. Now let's look into the second type of pattern in numbers, which is decreasing pattern. So here we have 100, 99, 98, 97. Clearly, this is a decreasing pattern. So the numbers are decreasing, so we can actually decrease by 1 each time to get our pattern. So this could be stated as start at 100, decrease by 1 each time. That could be the description for this particular pattern. Now let's look into the repeating pattern. Repeating pattern, as we also saw earlier, 543, 543, we have a core group that repeats, and so we could clearly write down this as 453, right? So 453, 453, and so on. The group repeats. Now, as an exercise for you, you have two questions to answer. Question number 2 here is describe the above patterns. You have seen that they can be described in many different ways. Try to describe in the best possible way. Question number 3 here is write next three terms for the above pattern. So I wrote some. You can add three more terms to this list. Now here is a note, which is Position of the number corresponds to the term number. So in the beginning, we did talk about term number, right? So here we are saying again that the position is the term number. In the pattern 13579, term number 2 means the second position is for 3, right? So term number 2 is 3. Does make sense to you? Term number 2, second term in this pattern 13579 is 3. Term number 3 is 5 and 9 is the fifth term. So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 is the fifth term. So that is how we relate term numbers and the numbers written at that position. It helps to describe any pattern. Now, let us have solutions of our pattern rules. So here is how I have described these patterns. So the first pattern which we looked into was 13579. I can describe this as start at 1. It is very important to identify from where are you starting. So you're starting at 1. And then how do you increase or decrease or change your pattern? So in this particular case, since it is increasing pattern, we increase by 2 each time. That becomes a description to write as a pattern rule for the given pattern, right? So that is kind of very simple description. We can add something to this for sure, right? So let's look into this as we move forward. Now we have 100, 99, 98, 97. That was the second pattern, right? Now as you can see, it decreases. So to describe it, I can say it is a decreasing pattern. I gave some additional information which is very important. It is a decreasing pattern. Then we'll describe exactly from where it starts and how does it decrease. So we have written start at 100 and then we are saying decrease by 1 each time to get the next number. So start at 100 and then less 1 each time. So we get 99, 98, 97 and so on. The third pattern which we talked about was 453, 453 and so on. It could be described as it is a repeating pattern. So we first describe whether it is an increasing pattern, decreasing pattern or repeating pattern. In this case, this one is a repeating pattern. So it is a repeating pattern and now we describe how it repeats. The core group is 453. So that is the group which repeats, right? So the core group is 453 and we can now write down the core group 453 repeats each time, correct? So that becomes a description. I hope that makes sense. Perfect. Now that brings us to another question. So in this exercise, you will see that we have introduced some questions in between for you to pause the video at this stage and write in your own words. How will you answer the same question, right? So the question here is now for you. Question number 4, find the 10th term in the above pattern. So you can extend these patterns and find what term comes in the 10th position. That is what it means. Find the 10th term in the given pattern. Let's move forward towards some difficult questions now. So take this as an assignment, right? We have some number patterns. We say these number patterns are challenge questions. They are not so easy, right? Let us see what kind of questions are these. The question here is describe the following patterns. Question number 5, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Well, we can definitely extend this, but how are we going to describe this pattern? That is tricky. Question number 6 here is the pattern is 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, 16, and so on. How are we going to describe this one? We'll think about it, right? And then question number 7 and 8 are 99, 98, 96, 93, 89. And question number 8 is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Well, slightly difficult questions for you. So that we will leave here as an assignment. Is that clear to you? Perfect. So it is an assignment for you. Try to describe these particular patterns, right? So we did first four, and now these four are kind of difficult. Think about it and then describe it. Let me take one example here. For example, in question number 6, the pattern is something like this, which is 1, 2, 4, 7, 11. What you should notice is how does it change? So definitely we are starting at 1. So you can write start at 1. That is clear. Now after that what happens? Going from 1 to 2 is like adding 1, right? So you say you add 1 to this. Okay. So you get 2. But from 2 to 4, what have we done? Well, from 2 to 4, we have added 2. And then from 4 to 7, and then 7 to 11, what numbers are we adding? Well, from 4 to 7, we are adding 3. And from 7 to 11, we are adding 4. That means we should add 5 next time to get the next number, right? Do you see that? So when you add 5 to 11, then we get a number 11 plus 5, which is 16. So that makes the things very difficult. So you can actually describe this pattern as start at 1, add 1, and then add 1 more each time. So each time you are adding a different number. You can also add that in the description. Add different number each time, which is 1 more than last time. So there are so many ways to describe in in these patterns, correct? So that gives you a hint for our question number 6. Now in the other questions, 99, 98, 96, we are decreasing by different number each time. Now you get the idea. So take your time to describe these patterns and then submit your assignment. Once you submit your assignment, I will provide you with the corrections and the correct solution also. Now let's look into another part of this particular video, which is when we have geometrical shapes, we could describe them in many different ways. A most important thing to describe is their color, their shape, and so many other things. We call these things as attributes. So let's try to understand this word, which is attributes. Attributes, a characteristic or quality that can be used to describe and compare things, right? So it is a characteristic or quality that can be used to describe and compare things. Now, some common attributes are shape, size, numbers, colors, texture, and position. You get it? So these are the different attributes. So let's look into these two examples and see what kind of attributes we are dealing with. So of course, when you see here, what do you think? How can you describe this pattern in terms of attributes? Well, I could describe in terms of shape, correct? Yes, I could describe also in terms of number, right? I could also describe this in terms of color. Yes, I could. So there are different ways in which I could describe. For example, in terms of color, I could say like what? I could say orange, orange, yellow, right? So let's say orange, yellow. And that repeats, correct? In case of shape, I could say square, square, circle, right? And in case of number, I could say two squares, one circle, two squares, one circle, right? So we say two square, one circle, two square, one circle, and so on. So that is how you could describe this particular pattern. So there are so many attributes which are changing. So clearly in this case, what attributes are changing? Color is changing, shape is changing, and the number is changing. So these are the attributes which are changing for the given pattern. Now the second pattern here you could also describe in terms of color, but the shape is kind of same. What else is changing here? Well, we see direction or position is changing. Correct? These arrows are pointing right or they're pointing down. So that is changing. And of course, you can add color, right? So color and position are the two things which are changing in this particular pattern. So you could describe in these terms. Now, that brings us to question number 9 and 10. Question number 9 for you is how many attributes are changing for each one of them, right? And question number 10 is describe the pattern by telling how each attribute is changing. So exactly as I did before for the first pattern. So you could name this is the attribute. Let's say for the second one, the attribute is position. So its position or direction is towards east, south, east, east, south, like that. Or you can say right, down, right, right, down. Or you can say color, blue, yellow, red, like that. Correct? So those are the different ways in which you can describe these patterns. Now, that brings us to again the same particular page only to give you a chance to describe them further. Is that clear to you? So last time we took time to describe the first one. Now here we could describe the second one. Let's say this one we could describe in the way as color, right? Or let's say position. So when I say color, I could write this as blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, and so on. And as far as position is concerned, we can describe this as right, down, right, right. Is that clear to you? So these are different ways in which we could describe them. But before describing, we should define the attribute. We are describing the attribute color, which is changing in this particular pattern, and then we are describing the attribute position, which is changing in this particular pattern. Correct? So that is how you could describe this. Now take a moment to answer question number 9 and 10 in your own words. Perfect? Now that brings us to the end of this video with an assignment. Now this assignment has a couple of questions. Here is question number 11. Question number 11 is write next three terms for the given pattern. 5, 7, 9, 11. Continue this pattern and write the next three terms. B. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and so on. C. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 and so on. So write down the next three terms. And question number 12 for you is write the 12th term in each of the above pattern, right? 12th term. So you understand what the 12th term is. Let me give you solution for one of these. Let's say the last one, right? So this is my first term, second term, third term, fourth term, fifth term. Like this, we'll continue and go to the 12th term. So here we have a 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Well, that is three's timetables, right? So let's go with 18 and 3 times 7 is 21 and 3 times 8 is 24. Or you can think we are adding 3 by adding 3 each time. So you could do that also. Add 3 and then keep on going like this, correct? So we have 33, 36. Well, we are going further. But now we are interested in the 12th term. So which is the 12th term for us? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th term. So the 12th term for our pattern C is 36. So here we have 36 as our 12th term, correct? Likewise, you could do the other questions also, correct? So that's a hint for you. Now, the patterns could be very difficult at times, especially for grade 3 students. I'm sharing with you some very difficult patterns, but I think you will like to explore even further, right? So, this is kind of extension to what you've learned. We're calling them as non-linear patterns. Wow, non-linear means we're adding different numbers each time. Well, we did see many non-linear patterns earlier also, right? We were adding different numbers each time. We are multiplying. They were also non-linear, but these are also non-linear. But this time there is a difference. I'm telling you the pattern rule and then we need to extend them. So let's look into question number 13, which says extend patterns with given rule. So these are the rules which I have already given to you. Using these rules, extend patterns, okay? Use calculator if required because these are big numbers. So you should write the numbers using calculator. You have to do two things here. First thing is write the next three terms, use the rule, right? Then describe each pattern. In your own words, you can again use the rules which are already given to you, but try to describe like start at this number and then do that. That could be a good description for your patterns. So the very first one here is 1024, 1024 is that number, a big number. And then we have 512, 216, and the rule is divide by 2 each time. So pick up a calculator, punch in the number 216, divide by 2, and see what you get. Well, I think the number 216 itself is wrong, first place. Okay, sorry. This is the wrong number, so I'm deleting this number from here. What you have to do is to divide by 2. So 512 divide by 2 and see what you get. Well, if I divide this by 2 using my calculator, I get 5, half of 5 is 2, then it is 11, 256 is my number. That was a wrong number. Right. Now again, we have to divide by 2 and write down the next number. Likewise, you make your series dividing by 2 each time. At least write down the next three terms, right? That is how you're going to do it. The second pattern here is what? Times the number by itself. Well, what does that mean? Times the number by itself. So first number, 1 times 1. Do you see? That is equal to 1. That is the first number, right? So let me write it slightly more clearly. 1 times 1 equals to 1. So that is our first term, right? The second term here is 2 times 2, and which is 4. And then we have 3 times 3, which is 9. And then we have 4 times 4, which is 16. So likewise, that is what I mean when I say times the number by itself. So pattern number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is being multiplied by itself. So for example, this position is fifth, right? So we'll do 5 times 5 to get 25 as our answer. You got it. So use calculator, times the number by itself. Continue the pattern. Now the last one here is times the number by next number. Well, what does that mean? Times the number by next number. Okay, that really means if my one number is 1, what comes next? 2 comes next. So I'll multiply 1 by 2 and get 2. Then I have 2 times, next number is 3, I get 6. And then 3 times 4 is 12. Well, that makes sense. We got 2, 6, 12. The next number is 4 times 5, right? So 20 is indeed 4 times 5. And likewise, we can extend. Perfect. So with that, we come to an end of this particular series. So we actually explored the number patterns in this particular series, and in the next series we are going to extend further these number patterns with some more complexity, right? Now here is a fun exercise for you, which is make your own patterns, right? So that is a fun exercise. Make your own patterns. You could use some of the interesting patterns which we did in the previous case. These are very interesting examples. You could say, well, multiply the previous number by 3 each time, maybe by 10 each time, something like this you could do. Now, we have something for you to explore. So let me call this page is explore. All of us like exploring. That is what we are going to do now. Question number 14 is make a pattern with figures and describe it. So you can make different figures and then describe it. For example, like what? Well, you can make one triangle in this way, one triangle in the other way. Kind of, you could do something else also. Make it more complicated if you can. Okay. Question number 15 is make a pattern with alphabets and then describe it. So, make a pattern with alphabets and then describe it. And question number 16 is make a pattern with geometrical shapes and describe it. Well, you could do that. Geometrical shapes, you understand? Triangles, squares, correct? So you could add a line to your shape and then you get different geometrical shapes. You could do that. So those could be few more. And now we are almost at the end with these last four questions with some ideas. Okay, so this time we are giving you some ideas. Okay, to explore further, right? That is the whole idea. So look beyond, look into your environment and find patterns. So this exercise is for that purpose. Question number 17 is, do you see patterns in animals? Well, you could list some, whatever you see in animals, right? So you could even sketch and show how the patterns can be seen in animals, right? Remember shells, right? You could see some patterns in the shells, for example, and some animals have dots patterns, some have stripes, so there could be different patterns which could be described, right? Choose the one which you can describe, okay? Now, question number 18 is, do you see patterns in flowers? Well, you do see, right? So you can describe some patterns in flowers. Sometimes they have three petals, sometimes five petals, sometimes seven petals, sometimes many, many more, right? So you could describe those kinds of patterns. You could also describe patterns on the floors. Tiles is a very good example. Many beautiful structures can be seen around and then you can describe them. So that could be a part of it. And question number 20 is, can pattern help in solving problems? Explain. So patterns can actually help in solving problems also, right? So if we know a pattern of a person, we know exactly where the person is going, for example, right? So patterns can help in problem solving. Here is a problem for you, which we'll discuss in the next video. So we could have some sticks, right? And then you could make triangles. You can make many more triangles as I'm arranging them. And that could be a geometrical pattern for you to explore, right? Do you see that? And then the problem could be number of lines, right? So the problem could be, let me write down here, find the number, you can say number of triangles in the fifth pattern. Correct? So we have already given you three patterns. So I like you to find the number of triangles in the fifth pattern. As you can see here, we have only one triangle here, and in this case, one has been added by three more. So you get four. Likewise, you can see the pattern of number of triangles and describe. Perfect. So that brings us to the end of this particular video. I think we explored a lot here, and that is the kind of question which will take us to the next step where we will see how we can actually explore the patterns a lot more, right? We'll introduce you to another concept, and that is T-chart. And once I introduce you to T-chart, and then we'll look into measurements and problem solving. That is going to be very interesting. So look forward to our next lesson on patterns. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to write your comments, share your views, and if you like and subscribe to my videos, that'll be excellent. Thanks for your time and all the best.